When the towers fell on September 11th, Marty Ross-Dolen was standing in her bedroom in Albany, watching the news with her young children downstairs. She had spent her whole life working towards a career in psychiatry, but in that moment, something inside her said it was time to let go. In this conversation, Marty shares what it was like to walk away from the identity she had built since childhood and discover a new one through writing, motherhood, and the long work of facing multi generational grief. This is a story about listening to the quiet voice inside and realizing you're allowed to change your mind.
And I just knew at that moment that things were gonna change for me. But I just knew something was something was changing. I was not all of this sort of sense of feeling torn about wanting to have more time with my kids was just it had been rumbling in the back of my head, but it was screaming at me while that was happening. It was the beginning of saying goodbye to this specialty and this career and this practice that I had devoted my life to.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Marty. Hello, Marty.
Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm good. I'm also tired. There's a couple things. We can be two things at once, right?
For sure. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift podcast. I just never knew that I needed to hear all these stories because when I was a kid, I was visiting my father. My parents were divorced. We lived states apart from my father, and I was visiting him. And one day after summer camp, he pulled me into his office and he had to tell me that my mom had been killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment in time, everything about my life and everything that we had kind of imagined for me growing up was like no longer possible because my primary parent was gone, the woman I lived with all the time, and was just going to visit my dad every once in a while. I was going to have to move to a new state. I was going to have to leave all my friends, all my family, my school, everything about my life kind of shattered in that moment. And this was like the time period was late 80s, early 90s. So nobody was talking about grief and kids are going to bounce back. And so I saw the adults around me who also did not grieve. I saw them realize that they wanted to make sure I was happy. So I absorbed that and like never, I just pushed it down and didn't really get to grieve. And I say all that because behind the scenes in my messy 20 years of trying to grieve my mom, I always wondered, do other people have these like line in the sand moments from like legit 1 second everything is different. And so now I'm on this like exploration of talking to all these people about these similar type moments, whether they're traumatic and external or they're like an internal fire that someone woke up one day and they decided to change everything about their lives. And so thank you before we even get to your story for just being a part of my healing journey through this podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be, and I'm very grateful and honored.
I think I knew before having these conversations, I think I knew like on the surface, the power that our stories have, both from telling it like to other people, but listening to other people's stories. And you and I were talking before recording about how it's also amazing how we connect to like maybe the weirdest parts of other people's stories, like not the really ones that we put out there as the most significant parts, but like people connect to the little tiny moments. And I just love that connecting the dots there.
Right, right, right. Yeah, the best part of telling my story has been really the discovery of how universal experiences that feel so personal really are. That has been just a gift.
It's it's funny because you're like, I could not imagine going through that, yet the way someone describes how they were feeling in the moment or how they process something, you're like, oh, I can relate to that. Even though our experiences are so wildly different, which is a good thing. Yeah. So the human thread is, they say it's very cliche that we have a lot more in common than we have that separates us. And it seems to be true. So I guess this is the hypothesis we're proving here through podcasting.
Right.
So before we get into your story, maybe you could tell us who Marty is in 2025. Like, how do you show up in the world? How do you identify?
Well, now I identify as a recently published author of a memoir.
Congrats.
Thank you. I also strongly identify as a retired psychiatrist. Probably my biggest strength in terms of identification is as a mom of two young adults. So I'm empty nested, but a very active parent. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm teaching writing, teaching memoir, and sort of discovering, in many ways, a new sort of exciting career.
Congratulations on the
Thank
book
you.
release.
Thank
It's
you.
I've heard it's a long endeavor for many people, and it's not quite as simple as opening your laptop and typing out a bunch of words, is it?
No, my book was 14 years in the making. It was definitely not a simple opening the laptop, and it required those 14 years. It was not going to happen any
Yeah.
faster or any earlier. So that's for
And,
sure.
and I bet you've learned a lot about your journey by kind of reflecting on it in this way and putting words to it.
100%. I learned so much writing my book and am really, in very many ways, a different person having written it. Between both the healing process of writing and also the process of reframing how I thought about past stories. And that only, I think, can come through writing.
I would venture to add podcasting to it. It's funny because I'll listen to my first, well, don't anyone else listen to the first couple episodes, but I'll listen to how I tell my story and the words that I choose and how I've kind of unfolded things years later, even though, my mom died 36 years ago next week. It's interesting how in the last couple years I found different words and different attachment and meaning through talking. So I would imagine it's very similar to the writing process of kind of like admitting things.
That's fascinating because really it's using words, right? They're both practices of using words. So why are they really that different? But so I think what you're saying is would be very true.
Well, it's like journaling. It changes people's lives. So I would imagine writing a memoir is a big, deeper version of that journal. So congratulations to you on releasing that. No, it's a
Thank
big
you.
feat, and we will definitely we'll talk more about it at the end, and we'll have a link in the show notes. And since it's a memoir, it's all about your story. So I'm wondering, however you want to do this, however you want to paint this picture to kind of like the before Marty that led to this version of Marty, how do you want to paint the picture of your life leading up to your life shift or or the before version of Marty?
Yeah, the before version was a person who, for as far back as I can remember, wanted to be a doctor. My father is a physician. I'm very close with him, and I also am a product of divorce. And but that's where my interest was always science and also psychology, human behavior, and I really knew that I was drawn to psychiatry as a field. And I mean, when I say like, oh, like I have an autobiography that I wrote when I was in fourth grade that said that I was going to be a doctor. Then I was going to be a neurosurgeon. That changed, but yeah. And then high school AP biology, preparing for college. Went to college because I loved the science building and wanted to be. And I was pre med, and then went to medical school specifically to be a psychiatrist. I was very driven. Went straight to training. 30 years old, I had done nothing except prepare myself for that career and finished training at 30. I also had my first child at 30. I went to medical school and I trained in New York City. And then I had my son. I had my son while I was, and just before entering my fellowship in child psychiatry. And then I worked for, I believe it was 2 years. Now I'm starting to question myself, but I think it was 2 years. I was director of the child psychiatry crisis service at Columbia Presbyterian in Washington Heights in Manhattan, and taught medical students and was taking my son every day to daycare that was available through the hospital around the corner. My husband and I just had a routine. He was also training at the same place in his specialty. And then when he completed his program, we decided to move upstate to the Albany area of New York. And I was at that time, I was pregnant. We moved. My husband took a full time job, and I took a part time job in psychiatry. I was feeling challenged to figure out how I was going to make these two things work, having little kids and having this sort of starting a career at that point. And
That
so,
you've worked your whole life for.
exactly. I should say that I did, I said that all my life I had wanted to be a doctor. There's one other thing that I also always wanted to be, and that was a writer. It was, I would write when I had time, creative writer, but it was not where I didn't have much time. And so I wasn't able to do a lot of it. I took a job when we moved to upstate New York that was a part-time job at the medical center. It sounded good, but it wasn't going to work that well for me. It was really that I would work at the hospital. I would work with residents, supervise residents and medical students, do some clinical work, but mostly the most important thing was that I needed to be available 6 weeks of the year to cover the other child psychiatrist when he took vacation. So when you have that kind of job, you just don't have that much control because you don't know when that person's going to take vacation. So I ended up putting my daughter was born, so I had a baby and a toddler, and I was having to have childcare for them, even though my my work was so irregular. My schedule was so irregular, and I also had started a private practice, which was picking up and getting busy, and I had a number of patients in my private practice. I always was feeling torn. All all parents feel torn, when they've got little kids or even older kids and work. It's the age old sort of balance challenge. It was starting to wear on me more and more. And I was feeling more and more drawn to want to just be home or just want to spend more time, have more time with my kids and not having them. So I ended up actually moving them out of daycare. We did hire a nanny, and I had them going to preschool. And this allowed for some more flexibility, and it was a little better. Then I remember, as we all do who were able to remember things, have memories from this time, September 11th, 2001, when 9/11 happened. On that morning, we had been in Albany for about 2 years. I remember my kids downstairs with the nanny. Actually, my son I had already taken to preschool. My daughter was home with the nanny. And I went and got my son from preschool and brought him home early. And then was in my bedroom upstairs getting ready for my day. My kids were downstairs with the nanny, and I was watching TV, and I watched everything unfold. I was on the phone with my mother-in-law. We were sort of in shock, what's happening? And I remember seeing the towers fall on TV, and I remember telling myself, sometimes we have those experiences where we see things and our eyes are seeing something, but our brains aren't registering it or are telling us that this isn't real. And that's what was happening. I was watching it and I was thinking, but this isn't really happening. Like that's not, those buildings aren't coming down. That's just like, I couldn't, it was literally a disbelief. And, and I just knew at that moment that things were going to change for me. I had a friend who was actually at the time he was training in the hospital at NYU, and I was on the phone with him and he was watching it outside his window. And I was thinking about all the people that I knew in New York and whether or not I knew anybody who was there or they knew anybody who was there. For those of us of a certain age, this was our peer group in these, I mean, lots of ages were in these buildings. And I also thought about the fact that, I had just finished with this job in crisis, in child psychiatry in crisis, right in the same city. and what was happening with that, how was that, how were, and the truth is that disaster psychiatry became its own subspecialty, or its own field, its own, not a subspecialty, not something that you would train in necessarily, I don't think, but it became its own field. Yeah, disaster psychiatry. But I just knew something was something was changing. I was not I all of this sort of sense of feeling torn about wanting to have more time with my kids, was just, it had been rumbling in the back of my head, but it was screaming at me while that was happening. It was the beginning of saying goodbye to this specialty and this career and this practice that I had devoted my life to. So, not, my at the time my husband was also not sure that he was in the career, in the job he wanted to be in for the long term. The challenge for us was that we were living in a situation where we needed both of our incomes, and it sort of became, we started to look for other opportunities for him, and prioritized the possibility that I might be able to take some time without working.
Yeah. So this was like a unlocking of realizing that maybe anything could happen at any moment, and I need to like do the things that my heart is drawn towards kind of moment for you. Because I mean, for someone that has your whole life from as you're a kid, you're working towards this big thing, and then to let it go seems pretty big.
Seems extreme.
Well,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem extreme necessarily, because I don't know if you felt, I don't, did you, when you pursued, it sounds like you were really interested in science and you really wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah, and I loved medical school. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
So it wasn't anything where you were kind of checking boxes and you figured once you hit this, you would be happy. Cause that's what I did. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
mine probably stems from abandonment of my mom dying and me feeling like I needed to be perfect. And so
Mm.
I just needed to do everything that society told me I needed to do, never finding that happiness piece. So that's where that question comes from. But it sounds like this was your passion all
Oh,
along. You
100%.
were
Yeah,
you were going.
I was doing what I loved. I mean, there were I wasn't loving it. Like, I loved it when I was in medical school and when I was in training. I wasn't loving it. I wasn't loving it after my kids were born.
Right.
I mean, it really, that's
Because you're
sort of when
torn.
it just, yeah, because it just, I was not feeling, I was just losing some of that passion for it because I had this thing that was so huge pulling me.
Some of that come from knowing how much your kids, like, as a psychologist or a psychiatrist, like the human development and how much your kids like will need you and
Need
all.
you?
Like, I feel like there would be that pull of like, oh wow, I can't I can't shrink on this side because they need it to become full form humans.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I believe there are, children are raised in homes where both parents work, throughout history. And I mean, it's more common than not. So, and they're beautifully raised and have, it really isn't a question. I wasn't questioning whether or not my kids were going to be okay. I did recognize their need for me, and how much they liked when I was with them versus, having to say goodbye. And yeah, and I wanted them to be raised in a certain way that where I had where I was much more active and present. But the thing is that what's significant to me about this, I mean, so I ended up, we moved to Columbus, Ohio, because my husband, he found, a great opportunity, and it allowed me to take a break. I also made the decision to not network a whole lot. I did get my license in Ohio, but I didn't, my medical license, but I didn't look for any kind of work. I didn't look for any part-time work, and I didn't do a lot of networking. And mind you, child psychiatry in particular, but psychiatry in general, in huge demand. I mean, every day I was being asked, when are you going back to work, by people I barely knew. But another huge thing drew me to being in Ohio, which is that my mom lived here. And I was feeling this draw to be, I had left home for college and had never lived in the same place where she was. And she had moved to the area. I had been raised in South Carolina. She lived there until she moved to Ohio. She moved to Ohio because we have a family business in Ohio, and I was familiar with Ohio with Columbus because of that too. But fast forward a lot of years, I've really come to understand this decision that was I mean, you talk about the life shift and how this pivotal moment changes your life forever. And there's no question that that moment of seeing those towers come down and the decision that, and knowing that things were going to change forever in my life, that I was giving something that I had devoted my life to up. I think about it every day, but I think about it differently now because of the work that I did that led to my book. And so I'll go back a little bit. So ends up being a multi-generational situation. In 1960, my mom was 14 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio, and her parents boarded a plane from Columbus to New York City that collided with another jet, and everyone was killed, including my grandparents. Again, my mom was 14. They were traveling to New York for meetings to place the family's magazine, the business, their magazine on the newsstands. And that magazine was Highlights for Children,
Wow.
the children's magazine.
Yeah.
So my
It was
mom
my
and
favorite
her,
waiting room
exactly,
magazine as a kid.
doctors and dentists' offices. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we're still around. We're still around. Almost 80 years old, 6 generations of family members. And so my book is about the experience of being raised by a mother in protracted mourning. Having lost her parents at 14, she was the second oldest. There were 5 kids, and they were all they moved to Austin, Texas to live with their paternal uncle and aunt, and then their family. Reminds me of your story, losing a parent so young and just having, it was in December. So a couple of the kids finished school in Columbus, but my mom and a couple kids just middle of the year went to Texas. 14 years old.
You said protracted mourning?
Protracted mourning. So what I mean by that is I grew up with a mom who was would get upset, start crying every time I raised the topic of these grandparents that I didn't know or other topics. And so I grew up in an environment where I had a mother who was struggling and had not healed from her grief. Heal from grief. That doesn't really, had not processed her grief. And I was a little kid. So that's what my book is about. It's also the story of my getting to know my grandmother through her letters. But it's become really clear to me because as I was writing the book, I say that I learned, so I was raised in silence. And I didn't know about the accident. I knew that they had died in an airplane accident, but I didn't know details. And it took until I was, we were living in Columbus 8 years almost before I realized I could research it on the internet. It was like, this blinder that just lifted, and I researched it and discovered. And then in 2010, there was a 50th anniversary memorial event in Brooklyn for the airplane accident victims. And so I attended that alone. And that was the beginning of my having a deeper understanding of what had happened and the beginning of my writing the book, which is why I say it was 14 years. I started writing just after going to that memorial event. But now I think about 9/11 and my grandparents' airplane accident, same city, same sky, same shock. And it makes perfect sense to me that as I was watching this happen on TV, I had no consciousness of it, but I was like, I'm done. Like this can change a life, and I have to live my life as if each day I need to do what I need to do and not feel torn. So that's why I feel like it's a life shift. The 9/11 event and making that decision was so huge, but it was propelled by something I didn't even realize at that
Yeah.
time.
Deep seated.
Right. And
family drama
right.
or
And
trauma, I should say.
yeah. I
Not
mean,
trauma.
what I talk about in the book about multi-generational trauma is just that, so my mom, as you said, silence. People weren't talking in the late 80s. They weren't talking about death, grief.
Not in
They
the
didn't,
60s.
not, they weren't talking about it. Honestly, maybe they started in the 70s, but the 20th century was a century of silence when it comes, and it was a century of a lot of trauma.
Probably because of the silence.
100%. But the silence served its purpose because people had to soldier on and move forward. I have ancestors who, in the, like 1860, they lost 5 children in 11 days to diphtheria. And I think the loss of children, sort of in many ways, to epidemics, and the loss of, you know, young men in world wars, and just the loss of women in childbirth, mothers in childbirth. It's just it's a we have trauma now. It's a different. We don't have that level, and I think human beings have just in many ways managed through soldiering on. And in fact, that family that lost all those children then had another batch of children, like four
Like
more
they did.
children, like that. And one of those children was the grandmother of my great grandmother, that was the mother of my grandfather that died in the airplane accident. And the way she was raised, very likely in silence around these children that had died, then responded to the loss of her son and daughter-in-law through silence. My mom and her siblings never heard her parents' names again. Yeah. So, or they, not in any kind of significant way. Then I realized while writing the book was that actually, because part of it, I was always kind of challenged by this question of, like, how can I have this thing be affecting me so much when I wasn't born and I didn't experience it? And I definitely had my experience with my mom, but then I realized actually I did experience the silence in the same way. And that therefore I kind of come by my own grief honestly, because
But I don't think you have to qualify that either. I think that is yours to hold. And I mean, growing up with a parent like that, I can imagine is quite challenging. As much as you want to love her, you also feel like you don't know all of it and you don't have that element. Do you feel like any of that pushed you to the career you wanted to have because you wanted to understand like what's happening?
yes, and when you say like I didn't understand, and I also was so driven to protect that
Yeah.
even though I didn't know what was going on, I was very protective of my mother because she was
Your mother?
struggling. Yeah, and my mother, right. So, is this why I pursued psychiatry? I would say that the real reason that I pursued psychiatry came more consciously from the trauma I experienced from my parents' divorce. That was more of my trauma. I saw a psychiatrist as a child, even though we didn't, there wasn't much talk. My mom still knew well enough that her kids would benefit from talking to somebody. So I loved what he did, and that's what made me think that I wanted to do that too. And he told me I would be good at it. And so I thought, well, and I don't know, 14 years old, started my Psychology Today magazine subscription and just started like having that mindset. So for me, but subconsciously, would it have been because I had a mom who was, really what it ends up being is post traumatic stress disorder? That's what's clear she experienced, and she still does. I'm sure in some subconscious way it did influence my choice, but I'm just a sensitive, like, person, always curious about other people's
Yeah.
thoughts and feelings
Well,
and
you also saw the
behaviors.
modeling of like a good experience in which I think that helps. Sometimes it's like one or the other, but it sounds like maybe you had a little mix of both. And
Right.
I always curious, and this might be a totally inappropriate question, but did you ever try to, with all your education and experience and all the things, try to help your mother? in ways? Or
From
did
a
you
s
just be like,
you mean as an adult, as a psychiatrist?
yeah,
You mean?
like,
Um,
or is that like a no-no in
no, no,
that
no,
field?
no. I mean, I wouldn't like, "Hey, mom, I need to can I prescribe juice?" I mean, no.
Because I feel like as humans, we're like, some of us want to really help. We want to be, maybe it's a tiny little savior complex of the people we love a lot. And I would imagine with all the tools you had, it would almost
Mhm,
be like, let me help, let me do this.
mhm,
But
mhm,
maybe
mhm.
you didn't have those feelings.
I think it's not it wouldn't if I did, it wasn't a conscious thought, like, I let me help in a s from my I mean, I certainly, as I learned, might have told her about some things I learned and to help her maybe understand herself or me understand myself better, but the helping was always part because it was always a situation where I was, wanting to be helpful. I also still to this day, you know, get a little, tightened and hold my fist when she starts to cry. Like it doesn't, it's still very ingrained in me that this feeling that I've had since I can even remember of just like not wanting this because you don't know you want your parents to be okay and you want them. So as a child, for sure, as any time. And I will say, my mom, now we cry together. I mean, it's not the same at all. We can, but still, I feel that a little bit inside that same
Yeah.
feeling.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it's different too. Like your mom, as a mom when you're younger, I think a parent innately doesn't want to show, the word is not correct, but like a weakness to their child, like they can't handle it. They need to be the bigger person, right? I feel like my dad probably did that after my mom died,
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
just like, we're just going to truck forward and we're going to do this. And did he break down behind the door? I probably, but he
Yeah.
probably didn't want me to see it.
Want you to see it. But
Right.
also, like, all of us, we were all kids. Like, your dad was a child who didn't like to see adults cry, so he knew that as an adult and didn't want you to have to see him cry. That's what I imagine too. Like, I
Yeah.
know that I try not to break down into tears with little kids because I know what that feels like from
Right.
my so,
It's interesting.
yeah, it is interesting. It
Yeah.
is interesting. Yeah.
So well, you were on the phone with your mother when that on September 11th, all that stuff was happening?
My mother-in-law.
Oh, okay. I was gonna
Yeah, my
say,
mother-in-law.
that might have
Yeah,
been a
yeah,
totally different conversation.
yeah. No, when air disasters have happened over my adult life and her, and we have connected about it, for the most part, she can't talk about it when
That makes
it's,
sense.
yeah.
Well, I'm curious, so you live in this life, this kind of like wanna be a full-time or wanna be around your kids as much as possible, love this career, but don't love this job or whatever, but just love the field and whatnot. You see this tragedy unfold. You realize, okay, I need to do something about this. You guys kind of take action. How did you start showing up in the world differently? Like, did you lean into things that you maybe wouldn't have done before because they weren't on a particular path? Like once you got settled in Ohio, what did that look like for you?
It was a new world because the role of a mental health professional in general, psychiatrist, and the way I was trained, it's harder to just be a regular old person in the community. In many ways, it's important to be more anonymous because you're working with people, and part of working with people is not necessarily having people be able to know everything about you and see your everyday life. So that's a challenge for people in this field. And I just felt like, it was like a whole new world of being able to walk my kids to school and meet up with all the parents. And I did. Many people knew that my background and my training, and I was happy to share it. And if people wanted to talk about their kids, I called it curbside, just a curbside eval. But I was not practicing. I was not treating. I was not, and it was very freeing. That was particularly with having little kids.
Showing up like a human. Not that you
Yeah,
weren't a
kind of.
human before, but like being
Right.
able to
It's
show up like
different.
as a mom and mom
Exactly.
first. I don't know.
Exactly, exactly. It's different, and that was also part of what I was letting go of, is some of that restrictive the restrictions that I was feeling in Albany, of just sort of not being able to just be a regular person in the community.
Was there an element of leaving it behind that was kind of like hard? I mean, if you spend so much time building it
Yeah,
up,
my identity.
right?
Yeah,
What does that feel
my
like?
um, it was it was really hard. It was every single day in my head, back like a ping pong ball, over and over and over. What do I do? What do I do? Do I go back? Do I stay? Do I keep doing this? Every year it would be a new time to make a new decision. There were some job opportunities that presented themselves, or I would talk to somebody in the field locally and think about ways that I might get, and people would say, just hang a shingle and you'll be booked immediately, and I knew that to be true. And over time, some of it started to relax. I got involved in, I served on community boards. I'm involved in Highlights, which is the headquarters are here in Columbus, really involved in my kids' lives. And there are very many activities and, all of the things that occupied that. But it was daily. And it's I mean, you do reach an age when it is sort of hard to go back. And now I'm 20 years out. I mean, I could go back. I have a license, and the one thing that it would be a struggle was getting board certified again. I would have to sit and spend. But I renew the license every year, but every 2 years. But I'm not board certified, and the main thing is that I decided, so I started taking some classes on creative writing.
Okay.
I
So leaning into
started,
some other
yeah,
things.
and I did have that drive to do that. And because, that was sort of finding that part of me that loved doing that writing as a kid. And, high school, college, I always was writing. And then I took some classes at Ohio State. And then during the pandemic, I decided to go back and get my MFA in writing in creative nonfiction. And that's when I was able to take on writing my book. And so I have a new sort of feel like I have a new place now where I can, and it's actually kind of perfect because my training in psychiatry informs memoir as a writing. I mean, it's
Informs
it
life.
informs it informs everything about me. I mean, it's a huge
Probably
part of
also
who I am.
unfortunate as well.
It can have its drawbacks, but it is who I am. Like when I say I'm a retired psychiatrist, it's just never I'm never not going to be. I'm never not going to be a doctor. It's just something I have as part of my existence. But I also now have this degree in writing and the ability to help other people. I'm training to be a book coach and help. But I love the idea of helping people tell their stories in creative ways.
Kind of like your other job.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like it's a perfect sort of melding.
I love that, like, I don't know, you mentioned, there's a certain point in life where it's too late, or not too late, but it's hard to turn the corner, right? But like you created something new, like a new version, or you kind of built upon, like you built a lot, there was a lot next door, and like you built a house on the lot next door. So you can still
Yeah.
see your old life and
Yeah,
all the
that's
things,
great.
and you're
Yeah,
there. It's like
that's
during the
great.
pandemic, I got a second master's degree because I was bored, not because I
Perfect.
any other reason, but the
Yeah.
podcast came out of it. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't think it would have happened. So my question really is, did the memoir spark did the idea of a memoir spark you to take the classes to get the degree, or did it become a byproduct of taking those classes and get the degree?
So I wrote, after I attended the 50th memorial in 2010, I wrote a sort of an essay about the experience. It was my first time writing about my grandparents, about the airplane accident. And so I wrote like it's like a 40-page essay about the experience of attending the memorial and then sort of going back into the story. And then I enrolled in a workshop, a couple workshops at Ohio State, and I shared that essay with the class. It was then that the professor gave me some feedback at the end of the semester and told me that he thought I was writing a book. And my reaction to that was that I took his feedback and the class's feedback, which was all a pile of papers because it wasn't all online at that point. And I went home and I shoved it into a cabinet and I didn't open it for 10 years because I did not want to write a book about this. It was painful to write that essay. I wanted to close this door. I think that, I'm a kind people who write, people who like to talk about stories are finding ways to process painful parts of their lives. I wanted to have checked that box with the essay because I couldn't go deeper. But then in that next decade, the teens, my mom became the archivist and the historian at Highlights and started to accumulate. I asked her if there were any letters of my grandmother's to send them to me. And then I accumulated all these letters over time. And then with the pandemic, I had this essay, I had these letters, and I knew I had a book. But, and that's when I said, okay, I'll do this. But it was weighing on me for a really long time. Just that it was that essay started was the kickoff.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it like when you first sat down after like those 10 years to try to like, because you were pushing it away for 10 years because it was going to be hard. Was it as hard as you anticipated?
It was incredibly hard. Yes. It took over my life for those years of writing. I had to put my entire whole self into the whole process. I had to give myself over to it, let myself be as vulnerable in the process as I could. Did a lot of processing with my mom, read thousands of pages of letters, and just would get up at 2 a.m. and just write in the dark and just whatever came out, and figuring out how to put it together, the structure of it, the way it was being written. It's a lyrical book. It's experimental. It's hybrid. There's all sorts of stuff in it. There's some poetry. There's even some fiction because it just had to become what it was going to be. I had to process anger. I had to process sadness. I had to, but I came from it. I came at it with a plate from a place of love. That saved me. That was a sort of guardrails for it because if I really had came from a place of love, I could tackle it the way I needed to in a way that felt right and good. It was really hard. I always tell writers when they're working on something that's really, really hard and really like taking them down, have something they're working on, have something to work on that's light. It's little. So the pandemic, I was like fighting with this chipmunk in my garden because he was trying to, take over a little section of the bed, and I was like writing about the chipmunk because it was cute and fun, and that's, I mean, that kind of stuff like pulls you through.
Yeah. No, I mean, but it's important. I feel like so much of my growth has come from like facing the hard things
Hmm.
and processing them. So I can imagine when you were done, that probably felt like weird because you had processed so much and you felt
Oh,
maybe
it was
what,
hallelujah.
yeah?
It was,
Did you
yes,
feel different?
yes, 100%. 100%. I saw all of it in a totally different light. And a large part of that was going through my grandmother's letters and meeting her and finding her. I was named for her. So I discovered her. I met her and I engaged with her in conversation, which is in the book. That was like, now I have a relationship I didn't have before.
That's
And
fascinating.
isn't it, it's really something. Yeah. To feel like you knew someone that passed before you were born.
Right. And you didn't really hear a lot of stories growing up about her, right?
A few, but nothing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I had a sense of her, but not like I knew her. And that came through writing. Like that came through writing as if we were having a conversation. And that was just lifted a weight. And, I mean, I had to go through a lot, but yes, I felt very different, very changed, and wouldn't trade it for anything. Would not trade it for anything.
I think it's important. I think it's lovely. I think however we can get our stories out, and you know this from a professional standpoint of hearing people's stories, but now you got to be be the person dumping
Right.
it in front of you, which was probably a totally interesting experience. But what I've found is the more that I say my whatevers out loud, the less messy it is in my head. I've always described it, not always, recently I've described this as like in my head, in a situation, whatever I'm facing, it's like papers are flying around everywhere. I say it out loud and it becomes just like a stack of papers that I can like
Mhm.
easily like filter through. And I'm
Mm.
like, but it's the same information that was up there as it is out
Mhm.
here. And it just makes more sense when I say it out loud. So I can imagine what going through that process, as hard as it would be, and then literally putting it in words in an order, was
Mhm.
probably quite healing in a way that you were very scared of for 10 years, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. It was like a puzzle that I didn't wanna try to attempt to do until I could, and then that puzzle became just a lot of sticky notes with
Mm.
words, with themes and titles, and then I took the sticky notes and started to put them in some order, and wrote to each sticky note, and then was able to find a book in there.
Has your
And
mom read the book?
she was one of the first readers. She couldn't write, she didn't read it while I was writing it. She didn't feel as she could, but yeah, she loves it. It's not easy, it's not easy for her to read, but she's my biggest cheerleader around, around writing, and particularly around this topic, and has always supported me, didn't put any restrictions on what I would do, and I think feels I think feels some pride in it, especially knowing that her mom's voice has been lifted from the letters. Her story and my story, that they have the potential to make a difference. And as I was mentioning before, like how, I was a little surprised by what people are most struck by, because there are a couple of things in my book that are like hooks, highlights. The airplane accident it was the largest commercial jet accident up till that time. It was a famous accident. What people are really, really, really connecting to is that it's making them think of their own stories, their own ancestral stories. What, thinking about, I mean, everything. Grandmothers dying in childbirth, and losing siblings in wars, and sudden accidents, and I hear so much, and it's just an honor to hear these stories and to feel like I'm doing even the smallest part of helping people think through and process what's happened for them. It's
Even though that's your whole
such a
career,
gift. Yes,
you're doing it
this
a
is how
different
it's
way.
just coming full circle.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
think it's beautiful. I think it's funny. I hear something on a lower, or it's a smaller scale, but as part of the kind of guest pitch process for the show, I always kind of push back to the guest of like, can you identify a very specific life shift moment in which you really feel that kind of everything changed in you? And I've heard many times from guests of like, I love that exercise, because sometimes we're like, oh, it was like for me when I first started the show, I was like, oh, it was when my mom died. But it actually was when my dad said the words to me, which was hours later. And so to narrow it down to like, because I was still living life, she was gone. Life was normal for me until I found out. So it's like a similar thing of people like,
yeah,
oh, I've never like pinned it down to when I flipped the page in this book and I saw these
yes,
three words,
yes,
life changed for me, which is
yes.
so cool and so fun
So
in a
cool.
weird way.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
No, I love it. And it just tells, like these human stories are just so important to share. I learned about through this podcast, like epigenetics, which sounds like
Right.
very much like an understanding that our ancestors may have had these experiences, and perhaps some of that is transferred through our DNA and we absorb
Right.
it, in,
Totally.
in some
That's
way.
right.
So
That's right. That's totally, it's a real thing. Multi-generational trauma is real.
yeah.
It's not, that's not a question. And the other thing that I can say from this experience, and in retrospect, just about my sort of how I perceive my life shift moment, is that everybody is allowed to change their mind.
Hmm.
We are
Were you
allowed to
allowed
change
before
our
that?
minds. I did not believe that I should be stopping something that I had put my entire life into, and to think that I would give it all up. And yet it's big. And yet I've, I have said since that day, or since the moment that I realized that I was doing it, everybody has the right to change their mind.
Yeah.
And it
That's
doesn't
good
matter your
permission.
age. Yeah. it doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter what's gone into it. It doesn't matter if you've got, in my case, $100,000 in debt. I mean, from medical school, it doesn't matter. Everybody has the right to change their mind because everybody's life, you have to have some control over where things go. And everybody's got one life, you got to live it the
As far
way
as we know.
it's meant to be lived.
Yeah.
That's
No,
true.
and
As
for
far
me,
as we know.
and this was maybe something similar to maybe how your mom felt. I mean, for me, growing up, my mom was 32 when she died, and I just never pictured a life after 32. Like, I just thought, so, like, I didn't have any plans for when I turned 33 because I just never thought it was a possible thing, even though everyone around me was old. Like, my dad got old and, like everyone else was getting older. But in
Yes.
my mind, I was stuck there. And so you're right. Like we don't know. Well, first of all, we don't know when our last day is going to be, and it could happen suddenly, like all the people on September 11th, like your grandparents and the people that they were sitting around. And so, yeah, change your mind all the time. Like, as long as you're not hurting someone with your decisions, I feel like this is your life. Do what you want with it.
That's right. Yeah.
But I love the idea. Like, now I'm picturing the house that you built next to the house you already had, of
I
like,
love that thought too.
it's
It's a
just
great metaphor. Yeah.
because you found a space in which all the things that you loved and you loved learning about other people, you can now use not only in your own memoir, but like helping other people. Like, so it's just a nice little like side road that you took.
Right. Exactly. It is. I came back around to the same work the same part of the work that I was doing. I came back around to
By
it, the
helping.
part that I loved. And yeah, that's exciting. And it's part of that continual discovery that shouldn't end
Yeah.
for people in their lives.
Maybe you'll make a big life shift decision tomorrow. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. And
Who
we
knows?
don't need to plan. We can just figure it out as we go.
That's right. That's right.
I'm wondering if like 2025, Marty, if you could walk into the bedroom where you're watching that television that day on September 11th before everything started crashing down, is there anything that you would want to like whisper in her ear or tell her about this journey she's about to go on?
I would tell her that thing about how you have the right to change your mind, that it's okay to let something go that you thought was never going to to be allowed to be let go, and that's okay. That all that's the and also I would say listen to your heart, listen to the voice inside. Don't let all of that stuff that's crowding out that deep voice silence it. If you have something that's really talking to you that's inside, just listen to it and let it have oxygen too.
We're not trained to do that, really. It feels
You
like
know,
we're just taught, like school teaches us to find the track and
we're taught to be on trajectories.
mhm.
I think that's changing some. I think younger people realize that you can have multiple careers over time or, switch things out. But my parents' generation, my generation, it's not as typical. We're taught to go on trajectories, let them play out, and then don't disrupt them.
Yeah.
And
And then retire.
and
And
then
there,
retire if you can.
if you can. Well,
And
back then,
right. I mean, that's what we came from. Yeah. So that's what I would tell her is that you can change your mind and listen to that
yeah. And
voice.
and you're going to be getting another master's degree, or you're going to be getting a master's degree in fine arts. So get ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know that I would have at that point. I don't think I would have thought that was something happening,
Exactly.
but,
You
but
never
yeah,
know how life
you never
unfolds.
know.
I
You
love it.
never know.
So, two things. First, if people want to learn more about your book, connect with you, what's the best way to find you in your book? Tell us more about that.
So Marty Ross-Dolen on Facebook, Marty Ross-Dolen on Instagram, and my website, martyrossdolen.com. And it's Marty with a Y, Dolan with an E. And those are all ways to be able to access. My book is always there, always gone, A Daughter's Search for Truth. It's out there. It was released in May, and
Awesome.
so it's out in the world.
Yeah, we'll definitely put the links to your socials to connect with you and your website and a link to your book, which I'm assuming is on your website, just so people can access it pretty easily. I'd also encourage anyone that listens to your story, maybe connects with a certain part of your story. I would encourage them to reach out to you and bug you and say, hey, this part of your story really connected with me. Here's why. Here's my story. Because I
Mhm.
really truly believe in the power of telling our stories. So if people have these opportunities to reach out, I hope they will. And I hope you don't mind that I just told them to do that.
No, not at all. As I mentioned, like, it's such an honor. I feel just it's just a gift to me to know that people are feeling touched by this and that it's moving them further in their own stories too. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your story in this way on the Life Shift, your story in the book, in the way that you did. And I hope that people will continue listening and to this episode and to read your book because I think there's so much humanity in getting these stories out there and they'll be out there forever now. And your
Right.
grandmother's,
Her
you and your
story,
grandmother's
mine.
relationship through your book, it's going to be out there.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Matt, and I just have to say the work that you're doing is tremendous, and so thank you for that too. I'm delighted to be here, so thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And the 8-year-old version of me is walking beside me and getting the
Mm,
healing that he needed at the time. And I'm super honored to be able to hold these conversations and talk to people like you that maybe I never would have bumped into in the world. And so thank you for reaching out and connecting. And I just want to say thank you to all the listeners for just being on this. However long this journey goes, I'm here for it. We're over 200 episodes now. So thanks for being a part of this, Marty. And I will
mhm,
be
my
back next
pleasure.
week with a brand new episode. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.